doors of the great hall slammed open before Nora Bennett could take a breath. 2 guards had her arms. Their grip was hard enough to leave marks she would find later, blue and shaped like fingers. She did not fight them. She had learned long ago that fighting men twice her size only made the walk longer. The hall was full. Every seat on the stone benches held a wolf of Ironcrest, and every one of them turned to watch her come in. She knew most of their faces. She had stitched their cuts. She had sat with their mothers through fevers. She had delivered 3 of their children in the same week during a hard spring 2 years ago. And one of those mothers, a woman named Ruth, was sitting in the 3rd row now, with her hands folded and her eyes on the floor. Nobody looked at her. That was how she knew how bad it was. At the far end of the hall, under the tall windows, Ethan Hale sat in the chair his father had died in. He was the Alpha King of Ironcrest, and he was her mate, and he had not spoken to her in 2 days. The guards let go of her in the open space before the steps. Nora stayed standing. Her healer's apron was gone. Someone had taken it when they came for her at dawn, along with her satchel, her knives, and the small silver ring her mother had left her. She stood in a plain gray dress with her hands empty, and her hair coming loose, and she made herself look up at him. Ethan looked back. That was the part she would remember for years afterward. Not the shouting, not the sentence. Just the way he looked at her from that chair like a man reading a page in a language he used to know. 40 warriors, said the woman standing at his right shoulder. Helen Crane was 60 years old and had a voice that carried without ever rising. She had raised Ethan after his father was killed. She had stood beside that chair for 19 years, first behind a boy who could not reach the floor with his feet, and now behind a king. She wore gray. She always wore gray. 40 warriors went to the treaty vault 3 nights ago, Helen said. 39 of them did not come home. The vault seal was broken from the inside. Not forced. Opened. Somebody who knew the wards let them in, and somebody who knew the schedule told them when. A low sound moved through the hall. The seal carried a scent, Helen went on. Our trackers took it 3 separate times, and 3 separate times they gave the same name. In the wreckage of the outer chamber we found this. She lifted her hand. A guard came forward with a leather satchel, burned along one side, and set it on the step. Nora's stomach dropped. She knew the satchel by the stitching. She had repaired that strap herself with wax thread because she could not afford a new one. That is mine, she said. The hall went quiet. She admits it, someone said from the benches. I admit it is my bag, Nora said, louder. I lost it 11 days ago. I reported it to the quartermaster. It is written in his book. Send someone. Go and look. We looked, Helen said. There is no such entry. Then the entry was removed. By whom? I do not know, Nora said. That is the honest answer, and I am giving it to you, because I do not have a better one. I did not go near the treaty vault. I have never been inside it. I would not know a ward from a wall painting. I am a healer. I set bones. I bring down fevers. Ask anyone in this room what I was doing that night. We did, said a man on the war council, a broad gray-bearded wolf named Bram Cotter. You were alone in the medicine house. No witnesses. From dusk until well past the hour of the attack. I was mixing fever syrup for the winter store, Nora said. That takes 6 hours, and it cannot be left. I was alone, because I am always alone. That is what the job is. Convenient, Bram said. It is not convenient, she said. It is my whole life. She heard her own voice crack on the last word and hated it. She pressed her hands flat against her sides and made herself stand straighter. Then she turned back to the chair. Ethan, she said. The hall stirred. Nobody used his name here. Not in this room, not in front of the council. But she was his mate, and she had 11 months of nights behind her. And she thought, foolishly, that 11 months had to weigh something. Ethan, look at me. He did. You know me, she said. You know what I am. You have watched me cry over a boy I could not save. You have carried me home when I fell asleep on the floor of the medicine house. I have never once lied to you. Not about anything, not about small things, not ever. So look at me now, and listen to what I am telling you. I did not do this. Somebody used my bag and my name, because I am the easiest person in this pack to hurt. I have no family. I have no rank. Nobody will fight for me. If you were going to build a lie, You would build it out of me. The silence stretched. Something moved behind Ethan's eyes. She saw it. She would spend 4 years trying to decide what it had been. You have one chance to explain, he said. This is it. I just did. You gave me a story about a lost bag and a missing entry in a book. Because that is what happened. 39 wolves are dead, Ethan said, and his voice did rise then, once, and the whole hall flinched. 39. I sent them. I wrote the order. I put my hand on the shoulder of a boy of 19 and told him it was a quiet post, an easy month, and now his mother is in this room, and I cannot look at her either. Do you understand what I am holding? Do you understand what it weighs? Yes, Nora said quietly, and I am telling you that you are about to put it down on the wrong person. Helen Crane spoke without turning her head. My king, she said, delay is a decision too. The northern packs are already asking why Ironcrest has not answered. If we do nothing tonight, by morning they will say the crown protects itself first, and its people second. That is the story that will travel. That is the story that starts the next war. Nora looked at her. For one strange second, Helen Crane looked back, and there was nothing in her face at all. No anger, no triumph. Just a calm, level attention, the way a woman looks at a nail she is about to hammer flat. Stand her down, Bram Cotter said. Put her out. It is more mercy than the vault got. Put her out where? Someone called. Ashfall. The word went through the hall like cold water. Ashfall was the border country in the Far East, burned over twice in old wars, thin soil and thinner law. Wolves without packs went there. Very few came back. That is not mercy, Nora said. Say what it is. Nobody answered her. Ethan stood up. He came down the 3 steps slowly. He was a big man, and she had always liked that about him. The solid, ordinary size of him when he sat on the edge of the bed pulling his boots off. But he did not look ordinary now. He stopped in front of her, close enough that she had to tip her head back. Tell me the truth, he said, low, just for her. Just once. If you tell me, I will find a way. I can send you somewhere safe. I can call it exile and make it something else. But I have to hear it. Her eyes filled. You want me to lie to you, she said, so that you can feel better about what you are already going to do. He did not answer. No, she said. No, I will not buy my life with a lie about a crime I did not commit. I will not do that to those 39. Somebody killed them, Ethan. Somebody in this room, maybe. And if you end this tonight with me, then whoever it was gets to sleep well for the rest of their life. Do not do it, please. I am not asking you to save me. I am asking you to keep looking. For one moment his hand came up. It got as far as her cheek, close enough that she felt the warmth of it, and then it stopped and dropped. The bond, Helen Crane said from the top of the steps. It has to be the bond, my king. A traitor cannot walk out of these lands carrying a line into the heart of the crown. Whatever she knows, she will always know it. And while the bond lives, she can feel where you are and what you are doing. There is no half of this. Nora heard it. She understood the words, but her body did not seem to accept them, because she went on standing there with her heart beating in a perfectly steady way, waiting for someone to say that of course it would not go that far. Nobody did. Ethan, she said. He stepped back from her. Kneel, said Helen quietly. It hurts less kneeling. Nora did not kneel. She stood with her chin up and her hands open at her sides, and she watched her mate's face while he began to speak the old words. She had heard them once before, in a story her mother told, and the story had been about a king 300 years dead. The words were short. That was the worst part. She had always assumed something so large would take a long time. The hall had gone completely still. Even the fire had gone quiet. Ethan's voice did not shake. Later, that would be the thing she could not forgive. Not the exile, not the cold ground of Ashfall, not any of it. It was that his voice did not shake. He said the last line. The bond broke. There is no good way to describe it. Nora had felt broken bones. She had set her own wrist once, alone, in the dark. This was not like that. It was as though someone had reached in under her ribs from behind and taken hold of something that had grown into her and pulled it out through her back, slowly, with care, making sure of every root. She stayed on her feet for 2 full seconds. Then her knees went, and the stone came up, and she caught herself on both hands, and a sound came out of her that she did not recognize as her own. All the warmth in her body left at once. There had been a place in her chest, a small steady heat, always there, so constant that she had stopped noticing it the way you stop noticing your own heartbeat. It was gone. In its place was a hole with wind moving through it. She could not see. She could hear the hall, far away, people talking, someone crying, a bench scraping. And then, over all of it, she heard something else. It came from above her, from the man standing 3 feet away, with his hands closed into fists. It was not a shout. It was not a howl. It was a sound she had never heard a person make, high and broken and endless, and it went up into the roof beams of the great hall and stayed there. Ethan Hale had not made that sound. His wolf had. The guards came for her. She felt hands under her arms, felt the floor drag away beneath her knees, felt the cold of the corridor, and then the colder air outside. Somebody put a cloak over her shoulders, and somebody else took it off again. Somebody said her name, and somebody else said, "Do not, she is nothing now." The last thing she saw before the doors closed was Ethan on his knees on the stone in front of his own throne, with both hands pressed flat over his heart, and Helen Crane bending over him with her gray sleeve across his back, saying something into his ear that nobody else could hear. The doors shut. They put her in a cart. It was still dark when it rolled out through the east gate, and Nora Bennett, who had a name in that place for 26 years, sat in the back of it with her arms around herself, and watched the only home she had ever known get smaller and smaller, until the road turned, and it was gone. The cart went east for 4 days. The driver was a young guard named Tom Ellery who had once carried firewood into the medicine house for her in a bad winter, and who now would not meet her eyes. On the 2nd day he passed a strip of dried meat back over his shoulder without looking. On the 3rd day he passed water. On the 4th day, when he stopped at the boundary stone and told her this was as far as he was allowed to go, he said, very quietly, "I do not think you did it," and then he turned the cart around and drove away fast, as though the words might follow him home. Nora stood at the boundary stone with everything she owned, which was a gray dress, a pair of boots, and half a strip of meat. Ashfall spread out in front of her. It was a wide country of low hills, gray scrub, and burned stumps that had never grown back. There were no fences and no fields. The wind came across it without meeting anything at all. In the far distance, she could see a thin line of smoke, which meant people, which might be good, or might be very bad. She started walking. The first night she slept in a hollow, under a fallen tree, with her arms wrapped around her knees. She was cold in a way she had never been cold before, and it took her a long time to understand that it was not the weather. The weather was mild. The cold was inside, in the hollow place under her ribs where the bond used to sit. A wolf without a pack loses warmth. A wolf without a mate bond loses more. She did not cry that night. She was too tired. She cried on the 4th night, when the meat ran out. By the end of the 2nd week she had found the smoke. It came from a rough settlement called Low Barrow. 40 or so people in patched houses, some wolves, some human, nobody asking anybody anything. There was no healer. There had not been one for years. She walked into the middle of it, in her ruined dress, and said, "I can set bones." A woman with a hard face and a bandaged hand looked her up and down and said, "Prove it." Nora took the bandage off. 2 fingers had been broken and had begun to knit crooked, and the whole hand had gone hot and shiny, with infection running up under the skin toward the wrist. "This will hurt more than anything you have felt," Nora said, "and if I do not do it today, you lose the hand by Sunday. Sit down." The woman sat down. Nora saved the hand. That was how she started. No pay, at first. A bowl of soup, a corner of a shed, a blanket that smelled of goats. Then a little pay. A knife. A pot. Dried root and clean cloth. By the first snow she had a room of her own, with a door that latched, and a shelf of small jars, and people came to her door, instead of dying quietly in their houses the way they used to. They called her Nora Marn. Marn had been her mother's name. She never once said Bennett out loud again. 2 things happened in that first winter that changed the shape of everything that came after. The first happened on the night of the full moon, 6 weeks after the Great Haul. She woke in the dark, sitting straight up, gasping like a swimmer coming out of deep water. Her whole body was warm, not fever warm, Warm the way you are warm when someone you love is standing right behind you in a cold room. She sat still with her hand pressed to her chest and waited for it to pass. It did not pass for hours. The bond was broken. She had felt it break. She had felt every root of it come out. But something was there. Not a line, not a voice, nothing she could use. Just a pressure. A sense of somebody very far away, pushing against a door that no longer existed. At dawn it faded. She told herself it was grief. Grief does strange things. She wrote it down in her book of notes, the way she wrote everything down, and she underlined the date, and she went back to work. It happened again the next month, and the month after that. The second thing happened in the 8th week, in the gray hour before morning, when she leaned over the bucket in the corner of her room and was sick for the 4th day in a row. She sat back on her heels with the cold clay floor under her and did the arithmetic, and then she did it again, because the first answer could not be right. It was right. She put both hands over her stomach and stayed exactly like that until the light came up through the shutters. She was carrying Ethan Hale's child. The heir to the throne of Ironcrest was going to be born in a shed at the edge of Ashfall, to a woman the whole kingdom called a traitor, and if one single person in that kingdom ever found out, the child would be taken, or worse, and Nora would not even be able to say a word about it, because in the eyes of the law she was nothing and had no name. She thought about it for 3 days. She thought about walking back west. She imagined it very clearly, the whole road, the gate, the great hall, standing in front of that chair again and saying, "Look, look what you did not throw away." She imagined Helen Crane's calm gray face while she said it. And she understood, with a clarity that felt like ice water, exactly what would happen. A child was leverage. A child was a claim. A child was the one thing that could pull the crown apart, and the people who had put her in that cart had already shown her what they would do to keep the crown together. They would take the baby, they would raise it in the gray shadow of that woman, and Nora would be a problem that somebody solved on a quiet road one night. So she made her decision, alone, in a shed, in the dark, and she never went back on it for 4 years. Nobody would ever know. She would not say his name. She would not say the pack's name. If anyone asked, the father was a man from the road who did not stay, and she would say it with a shrug and let them think what they liked about her. That spring she moved north. She did not stay in Lowbarrow because Lowbarrow was too close to the boundary stone, and stories travel along roads the way water travels downhill. She walked for 11 days with her jars wrapped in cloth and her book of notes strapped to her back, and she came at last to a town called Halden Cross, which was human, mostly, and sat where 3 trade roads met, and which was big enough that a new face was not news. She rented 2 rooms above a bakery. She hung a small wooden sign on the door, with nothing written on it but an open hand. In the last week of autumn, with the baker's wife holding one hand and a lamp burning low, Nora Marne gave birth to a son. He came out furious and loud, with a shock of dark hair and a grip like a trap, and when the baker's wife put him on her chest, Nora looked down at his face and felt the hole under her ribs fill up, not with what had been taken out of it, but with something new and enormous that had nothing to do with any king. "Hello," she whispered. "There you are. There you are." She called him Noah. He had his father's eyes. She saw it the first time he opened them properly, on his 4th day, in the light from the window, and it went through her like a blade. She held him tighter and made a promise out loud to an empty room. "You will never stand in front of anyone and beg to be believed," she said. "Not you, not ever. I will make sure of it." Outside, the first snow of his life came down over Halden Cross. And far away to the west, in a great hall with a cold fire, a king, who had not slept properly in 5 months, sat alone in his father's chair and listened to something inside him crying, and did not know that the world had just gained one more Hale. The chair was too big for him now. Ethan Hale sat in it for 11 hours on the day the northern envoys came, and when they left he found that he could not remember a single thing any of them had said. Owen Grant had to repeat the whole meeting to him afterward, standing in the empty hall with a candle in his hand, while the king stared at the fire. "They want a joint patrol on the Ridge Road," Owen said. "They want it in writing. They want your seal on it before the frost. Give it to them. You have not read it. Then read it to me." "I did," Owen said. "Twice." Ethan closed his eyes. 5 months had passed since the night in this hall. On paper, Ironcrest was steady. The vault had been rebuilt with double wards. The families of the 39 had been given land and silver, and a place at the winter table. Bram Cotter had led 2 patrols east, and come back with nothing, which everyone agreed proved that the danger had ended when the traitor was put out. On paper, the king had done everything right. Inside him, something was tearing itself apart. It had started the night the bond broke. His wolf had made a sound in front of the entire court, and Ethan had gone down on his knees on his own floor, and since then, the wolf had not spoken to him once. That was not how it worked. A wolf and its man argued, agreed, pushed, pulled. His had been loud since he was 12 years old, a constant warm weight at the back of his thoughts, opinionated about food and weather and people. Now there was only silence, and behind the silence, pressure, like a shut door with something leaning against it. He could not shift. He had tried on the 4th night, alone in the yard, and nothing had happened at all. He had tried again a week later, and had gone down in the grass shaking, human and useless, with his hands in the dirt. The autumn hunt came, and the king did not run in it. The winter ceremony came, and the king stood on the platform in a heavy coat, while the pack changed shape around him, and pretended not to look. The court began to talk. "They are saying you are ill," Owen told him. "Let them. They are saying other things too. Let them say those as well." Owen Grant was 34, plain-faced, and had been the king's second since they were boys throwing stones at the river. He had never once flattered him. He said, "Ethan, look at me. When did you last sleep a whole night?" Ethan did not answer. The first full moon of winter came 6 days later. He remembered going to bed. He remembered the shutters rattling and the fire dying down, and a strange restlessness in his legs that he put down to too many hours in a chair. He remembered thinking, without any particular feeling, that it was going to be a bright night. He woke in a field. It was 2 days later. He was lying face down in wet grass, a very long way from anywhere, human, with no shirt and no boots. His hands were torn. His throat felt as though he had swallowed broken glass. When he pushed himself up onto his knees, every muscle in his body screamed at him. The deep, specific ache of an animal that has run without stopping for a full day and a night. Owen found him 3 hours later, riding hard along a farm track, with 4 guards behind him and a spare cloak over his saddle. "Do not," Ethan said, when Owen opened his mouth. "I have not said anything." "You were going to." Owen swung down and put the cloak around his king's shoulders and said nothing at all for the whole ride back, which was somehow worse. It happened again the next month. This time Owen was ready. He had 6 riders waiting in the yard at moonrise, horses saddled, and when the thing that had been the king came out of the doors of the great hall at a dead run and cleared the outer wall in one jump, they went after it. They lost it twice in the dark and picked the trail up both times. It ran east. It ran without pausing, without hunting, without drinking, straight across country, in a line as clean as a drawn string, over the ridge, through the marsh, at Wilder Bottom, out past the boundary stone, and into the burned hills of Ashfall. Just before dawn on the 2nd day, it stopped. The riders came up over a rise and saw it below them in the gray light, standing perfectly still, in front of a collapsed cottage on the edge of a dry stream bed. Half the roof had fallen in. There was no door left, only an empty frame with the hinges rusted through. The wolf went to the doorway. It put its nose to the ground, and then to the frame, and then to the ground again, and it circled the whole ruin twice, slowly, and came back. Then it lay down across the empty doorway. And it began to cry. The riders had all heard wolves howl. Every one of them had howled themselves. Howling is a big open sound, made to be heard, made to reach across valleys and say, "Here I am, here we are, come home." This was not that. This was small. It came out low and cracked and folded in on itself, over and over, without stopping, the sound of something trying to be quiet and failing. It went on for 2 hours. Not one of the 6 men on that ridge said a single word for the whole time, and afterward, back at Ironcrest, not one of them ever repeated what they had heard. 2 of them asked to be moved to other duties. The other 4 stayed and never spoke of it again, not even to each other. When the sun was fully up, the wolf stood, shook itself, and started walking west, and somewhere in the 3rd mile it went down in the grass, and Ethan Hale woke up in it. He rode back in the cart with a blanket around him. Halfway home he said, "Where was I?" "Ashfall," Owen said. "About 60 miles in. There was a cottage." Ethan looked out at the road. "Was anyone there?" "No. It has been empty for years. The roof is down." Ethan nodded slowly and did not ask anything else, and Owen watched the side of his face and made a decision he did not tell anybody about for a very long time. That night, in his own quarters, Owen Grant took a fresh sheet of paper and drew the borders of the eastern country from memory. He marked Ironcrest with a square. He marked the collapsed cottage with a small circle, and beside it he wrote the date. Then he put the paper in the bottom of his chest and locked it. The 3rd moon, they tried chains. It was Helen Crane's suggestion, and she made it in the gentlest voice in the world, in front of the small council, with her hands folded. "He is going to be seen," she said. "Sooner or later, some farmer in the border country is going to look out of his window at a king of the wolves, lying in the dirt, crying like a lost dog, and by spring, there will not be a hall in the north where that story is not told. We can be kind about this, or we can be careful. I would rather be careful." "He is not an animal in a pit," Owen said. "No," Helen agreed. "He is the crown, which is why he cannot be seen behaving like one." They tried it. The chains held for 11 minutes. Afterward, Ethan sat on the floor of the lower room with his back against the wall and his wrists raw, and looked at the twisted metal. And for the first time in 3 months he laughed. A short, ugly sound with nothing good in it. "Do not do that again," he said. "Ethan." "I mean it, Owen. I mean it. Whatever this is, it is not going to be stopped by a smith, and I will not spend the rest of my life being tied up once a month like a bad horse." "Then tell me what it wants." "I do not know." "You do," Owen said. "You know exactly what it wants. You are just not going to say it." Ethan looked up at him. The silence went on a long time. "Say it then," Ethan said at last, "since you are so certain." "It wants her," said Owen Grant. Nobody in that kingdom had said the word "her" in front of the king for 5 months. The name itself had gone out of use entirely. In the medicine house they still called the fever syrup by her recipe number and not by her name. Even the people who whispered that she had been innocent whispered it without saying who. Ethan stood up. "The bond was severed," he said. "I severed it. I said the words myself, in front of 600 people. There is nothing to want." "Then why does it run east?" "Because it is broken." "It runs east on a straight line," Owen said. 60 miles, both times. No hunting. No water. That is not broken, Ethan. That is looking. Get out." Owen got out. He went back to his room and unlocked the chest and took out the map, and he added the 2nd circle, and the 2nd date. By the end of that 1st year, the court had a name for it. They called it the King's Affliction, and they said it the way people say the name of a bad winter, quickly, and then they changed the subject. On the days after a full moon, nobody scheduled meetings. The kitchen learned to keep broth hot. The stable learned to keep 4 horses saddled. The gate guards learned the exact hour to open the east gate without being told, and to look at the wall while it went past them. And every month, without fail, the thing inside the king got out and went looking, and every month it came back with nothing, and lay down somewhere in the dark, and cried. Ethan ruled. That was the strange part, the part that the histories of Ironcrest would later find so difficult to explain. In the daylight, in the chair, he was the best king that country had seen in 3 generations. He settled the Ridge Road dispute without a single blow. He rebuilt the grain stores. He took the tax off the smallest holdings, and put it on the largest, and stood in front of the great families, and dared them to argue, and they did not. He listened. He remembered names. He signed nothing he had not read twice. He was thorough, and steady, and completely empty. He closed the east wing of the residence in the 2nd month, and never opened it again. Her clothes were still in it. Her comb was still on the sill. He gave the order at midday, in a perfectly ordinary voice, and then went and sat in a council meeting about drainage. He did not take another woman. The council raised it in the spring, carefully, the way you raise a subject with a man holding a lamp near dry hay. The kingdom needed an heir. There were 3 suitable matches. Ethan listened to the whole presentation to the end, thanked them for their care, and said no. They raised it again in the summer, and he said no. They raised it in the autumn, and he stood up and left the room. The truth, which he told nobody, was that he had tried once. A woman of good family, kind, patient, entirely blameless, had been seated beside him at a dinner, and had put her hand on his arm, and his wolf had come up out of the silence for the first time in 8 months, and hit the inside of his chest so hard that he had to leave the table. He had stood in the corridor, with his hand flat against the cold stone, and said, out loud, to nothing, "What do you want from me?" Nothing answered. But the pressure behind that shut door got heavier, and did not let go for 3 days. There was one more thing, and he never told Owen about it either. Sometimes, in the hour before the moon rose, he would feel warm. It would come on all at once, in the middle of a sentence, in the middle of a corridor, a small steady heat under his ribs where the bond used to sit, so exactly like the old feeling that the first time it happened he had put his hand to his chest and said her name out loud before he could stop himself. It lasted a few minutes, then it went. He knew what it meant. Any wolf would have known. A severed bond leaves nothing. No heat, no line, no reaching. If there is anything at all on your side of it, then it did not sever. It only went quiet. He knew. He simply could not afford to know it, because knowing it meant that on a cold night in the Great Hall, in front of 600 witnesses, he had taken the one person who had never lied to him and thrown her into the burned country for the rest of her life, and had been wrong. So he did not know it. He worked instead. 4 winters went by. Halden Cross was a town of about 2,000 people where 3 roads met, with a market on Thursdays, a bakery that everyone agreed was better than it needed to be, and a healer above it whom people called Marn. They did not call her the healer. They called her Marn, flatly, the way you say the name of a thing that has always been there, and the reason was that within 2 years of arriving, she had become the person the town sent for when the physicians shrugged. She had a method. She wrote everything down, every patient, every dose, every result. In a series of thick books she bought one at a time with her own money. If something worked, she wrote why. If someone died, she wrote that too, in the same neat hand, with the same detail, and she read those pages more often than any of the others. She took payment when people had it, and did not when they did not, and made up the difference by selling winter tonic to the carters, who swore by it and carried her name down all 3 roads without her ever asking them to. And she raised a boy. Noah Marn was 4 years old that 4th winter, and he was, in his mother's private and completely unbiased opinion, the most exhausting child ever born. He climbed everything. He asked about everything. He had learned to read at 3 because he could not stand not knowing what the labels on the jars said, and now he read them out loud, constantly, including in the middle of the night, including the ones that said things like poison, do not touch, which he pronounced with enormous relish. He was also, and this was the thing that made the back of Nora's neck cold, never sick. Not once. Not a fever, not a cough, not a rash. In a town where children were dropping with the winter chest every year, hers ran through it barefoot, and came out grinning. He healed fast. A cut on his knee in the morning was a pink line by evening. When he was 3, he fell off the bakery wall, a fall that should have broken his arm, and he got up and complained about his sleeve. Nora knew what it meant. She said nothing, ever, to anyone. She kept him in long sleeves in the summer, and taught him to lose races on purpose, and told him, over and over, in the calm voice she used for splinting bones, "We are quiet people, Noah. We do not show off. Showing off is for people with nothing to protect. What do we have to protect?" "Each other," she said. "That is enough." The other change was in her. It came on slowly, and she noticed it, the way you notice a tooth, which is to say, all at once, one day, in the middle of doing something else. A carter came to her with a stomach complaint, and while she had her fingers on his wrist, she knew, with a certainty that had nothing to do with any symptom, that he had eaten something that was working against him on purpose, not spoiled, wrong. She could feel it under her hand the way you feel a wire under a blanket. She asked what he had eaten. He listed 6 things. On the 4th one, she knew he was guessing, and on the 5th, she knew he was lying, and she knew both of those things, the way she knew the wall was behind her. She got the truth out of him in 4 minutes. A rival on the road had put something in his flask. She had the man drinking milk and charcoal within the hour, and he lived. After that, she started testing it. She could not read minds. She wrote that down carefully, because it mattered. What she had was narrower and stranger. When she was touching someone, or very close to them, she could feel the difference between a body that was failing on its own and a body that was being made to fail. And she could feel the small hot flicker that goes through a person when they say a thing they know is not true. No Omega in any story she had ever heard could do that. She thought about it for a long time, at night, with Noah asleep across the room, and the only answer she could find was one she did not much like. A bond that is torn out does not leave you as you were. Something had gone out of her that night in the great hall, and something else had grown into the space, the way a tree grows around iron. She used it, quietly, carefully, and year by year, the number of people who owed Marn of Haldencross their life climbed, and the name went a little further down each of the 3 roads. In the 4th spring, Owen Grant took his map out of the chest and spread it on the table, and stood looking at it for a long time, with a cup of cold tea, going colder at his elbow. There were 41 circles on it now. He had marked every one, every month, 4 years of them. A ruined cottage, a crossroads, a sheep pen, a dry well, a bridge, a hedge at the corner of somebody's field, a doorway of a house in a village called Farron, where a woman had lived for 6 weeks and then moved on. For 4 years he had looked at it and seen madness, a mind scattering itself across the map. That morning, for no reason he could name, he took a piece of string and laid it along the circles in the order of their dates. He stood back. His cup went over, and he did not notice. It was not scattered at all. It was a search. Wide sweeps first, in the first year. Huge and desperate, covering ground. Then narrower again. Then, in the last 18 months, it had stopped sweeping altogether, and had begun to move in a line, north and east, from one small place to the next, in order, the way a man works his way along a row of doors. And every one of the last 9 circles was a place where somebody had lived and gone. It was not lost. It was following a trail 4 years cold, and it was catching up. Owen sat down slowly. Then he got up, put on his coat, told the guard on the door that he was riding out on private business, and did not tell his king anything at all. The man on Nora's table was going to be dead before morning, and both of them knew it. They had brought him in off the North Road at midnight, 2 carters carrying him by the shoulders and feet, and they had put him down and backed away fast, because the smell coming off him was not the smell of an ordinary wound. There was a hole under his ribs, 3 days old, badly closed, and around it, the skin had gone a color that had no business being on a living person. He was a wolf. Nora knew that the moment she touched him, because his heart was doing something no human heart could do, and still be beating at all. "Get the lamp closer," she said. "Noah, out, now." "But I can hold the—" "Out." The boy went. She heard his feet on the stairs, and then heard them stop halfway down, which was as far as he ever went, and she let it be. She worked on the man for 2 hours. She got the wound open and clean. She got the poison out, most of it, and it was poison. She knew it under her palms in the first 30 seconds. The wrongness of a body being pushed, instead of a body simply losing. But she had come to it 3 days late, and there was too much of it in him, and by the 2nd hour, his hands had gone cold, and his eyes had cleared in the way that eyes clear right at the end. "Do not bother," he said. His voice was thin. "I know what this is. Be quiet." "You are good," he said. "You are very good. I have had 4 different people at me since the road, and you are the only one who knew inside a minute. Where did you learn?" "Everywhere. Drink this." He drank it. It would not save him. It would take the edge off the next hour, which was all she had left to offer. "What is your name?" she asked. "Peter Shaw." "Where is your pack?" "Peter Shaw." He laughed, and the laugh turned into something worse, and when he had finished, he lay looking at the ceiling. "I have not had a pack since I was 20, he said. "I take work, roads mostly, carrying, watching, sometimes other things." Nora wrung out the cloth and said nothing. She had heard 100 versions of this speech in 4 years. Men on the road talked at the end. It was almost always the same, and it was almost always dull, and she listened to every word of every one of them, because it cost her nothing, and because a person should not have to say the last thing they will ever say into an empty room. "I did a job once," Peter Shaw said. that I should not have done. Most people have. No, he said. Listen, I want to tell somebody. I have had 4 years of not telling anybody, and it has been sitting on me like a stone. Something in the room changed. Nora did not know why. She put the cloth down. Go on, she said. There was a place in the west, he said. Big pack. Wolf Kingdom, proper one, with a king in it. Iron Crest. Nora's hands went still on the edge of the table. They had a vault, he said. Treaty vault, wards on it, the whole business. 4 years ago, near enough, a woman came to me at a roadhouse, 6 days east of there, and asked if I could put a bag somewhere. A bag. A satchel, he said. Leather. Burned along one side, though it was not burned when she gave it to me. She wanted it left inside the outer chamber of that vault on a particular night. She had the schedule. She had the ward pattern, which she should not have had, and she had a way in through the south drain that was not on any plan I have ever seen. She did not want anything taken. She was very clear about that. Only the bag left. Nora heard a sound and realized it was her own breath. How much? She said. 200 in silver, said Peter Shaw. Iron Crest mint. New. Not a mark on them. I remember because I had never seen that much clean silver at once, and I sat in a barn afterward and counted it 4 times like a fool. Who was she? She never said a name. What did she look like? Older, he said. 60 maybe. Tidy. Gray clothes. Plain. Good cloth. She talked like nothing was happening. That was the thing that has stayed with me. She talked about the drain, and the wards, and the hour, the way a woman talks about buying flour, and she had a scar. Nora's whole body went cold from the neck down. Where? She said. Wrist, said Peter Shaw. The left one. Thin white line, all the way round, like something had been tied there a long time ago and never healed right. I saw it when she pushed her sleeve back to count the coin. The lamp hissed. Downstairs in the bakery, a board creaked as it cooled. Nora Bennett stood in her own room in Halden Cross with her hands flat on the table and looked at a dying stranger and heard, very clearly, in her memory, a calm voice at the top of 3 stone steps saying, "There is no half of this." She had seen that scar 1,000 times. Helen Crane wore her sleeves long, but she pushed them back when she wrote, and she wrote constantly, and every single person in that hall had watched her hand move across paper for 19 years. 2 nights after I left the bag, Peter Shaw said, 39 of their people died at that vault. I heard about it in a market. I sat down in the road. He turned his head and looked at her. They put a woman out for it, he said. That is what the story says. A healer. Her own mate did it, the king himself, in front of the whole pack, and he cut the bond and had her carried east into the burned country, and nobody has heard of her since. That is what I did with my 200 silver. Nora could not speak. I have thought about going there, he said. Every year I think about it, and every year I think, who is going to believe a roadman with no pack? They would hang me in a morning and change nothing, and the woman with the scar is not a woman who leaves a thing half done, and I found that out anyway, did I not? He moved one hand weakly toward the wound under his ribs. Somebody found you, Nora said. Somebody has been finding people, said Peter Shaw. 3 of us worked that job. Ned Halloway went into a river 2 winters ago, and Ned Halloway could swim like an otter. Card went off a roof in Farron last spring. I have been keeping away from windows ever since, and it turns out you want to keep away from roads as well. Peter. Nora's voice came out steady, and she did not know how. Peter, I need you to say all of that again while I write it down. Why? Because it matters. He looked at her for a long moment, and something in his face changed, and she understood that he had worked it out, right there, at the very end. He did not say it. She would always be grateful to him for that. Get your paper, he said. She wrote for 40 minutes. She wrote everything. Dates, the name of the roadhouse, the drain, the ward pattern, the 200 coins, the scar on the left wrist. When it was done, she read it back to him, and he nodded at the parts that were right and corrected 2 that were not, and then he put his shaking hand at the bottom of the last sheet and drew a mark, because he could not write his name. Is she alive? He asked. The healer. Do you know? Yes, Nora said. She is alive. Good, said Peter Shaw. He died an hour before dawn. Nora sat with him the whole time. When it was over, she washed her hands, and went and stood at the window, with the 4 sheets of paper in her fist, and watched the sky go from black to gray, over the roofs of Halden Cross. She had it. 4 years of being a story people told. 4 years of a hole under her ribs. 4 years of teaching her son to lose races. And she had it in her hand. The whole thing. Names and dates and a drain and a scar. And it was worth nothing. She made herself stand there and think it through properly, coldly, the way she thought through a body on the table. The witness was dead. She had a paper marked by a man who could not write, describing crimes committed by the most trusted person in the kingdom, carried by a woman who had been publicly declared a traitor and cast out. There was no court in the North where that paper survived contact with Helen Crane. It would be called a forgery inside an hour. Helen would say, "Of course the outcast produced a confession. She has had 4 years and nothing to do." And then Helen Crane would know exactly where Nora was. And Helen Crane, according to a man who had just died on that table, was working her way along a list. Nora turned and looked at the door of the small room where her son was sleeping. She thought about a woman in gray standing in that doorway. She stood there for a long time, with the papers in her hand and the light coming up. Then she crossed the room, opened the stove, and put them in. The paper caught at the corner and curled and went up bright, and she watched the words go, the roadhouse, the drain, the 200 coins, all of it, and she did not cry, and she did not look away, and when it was ash, she closed the iron door. That was the morning Nora Marn stopped being someone who was waiting. For 4 years, in a part of herself she never took out and looked at, she had been waiting. For a rider on the road. For a letter. For someone to come and say, "We found out. We were wrong. Come home." She had told herself she was not, and she had been, the whole time, the way a person with a bad tooth tells themselves they are not thinking about the tooth. She stopped that morning. She woke Noah at 7, gave him bread and honey, walked him to the widow Pratt's for his letters, came back, cleaned the table she had lost a man on, and opened the door for the day's patients. 200 miles west, Owen Grant was standing in the mud of a village called Farron, holding a horse he had ridden too hard, talking to an old man about a woman who had lived in the end house for 6 weeks 4 years ago. Healer, she was, the old man said. Not from here. Only stopped the one winter. Did she give a name? Marn, I think. Something like that. Quiet. Kept herself to herself. Fixed my daughter's hand when it went bad, and would not take money for it. Owen went very still. Where did she go? North, said the old man, and shrugged. They all go north. The sickness reached the northern packs at the end of that summer, and it moved faster than anything anyone had ever seen. It began in Fell Harrow, 40 miles above the Ridge Road. In 11 days it had crossed to Thornbeck and Gower's Rest. By the 3rd week the roadhouses were closed, and the markets were empty, and the 2 smallest packs in the north had sent messages to Ironcrest that were not requests anymore. They were pleading. It took wolves. That was the thing nobody could understand. Humans in the same houses stayed well. It went for wolves, and it went for the strong ones first, the fighters and the runners, and it started with a fever that broke on the 4th day, and made everyone hopeful, and then on the 6th day the strength went out of them, and did not come back. Ironcrest sent healers. 6 went north, and 4 of them came home sick. Ethan Hale did not sleep for a week. He sat in the map room with the reports coming in, and read every one of them himself, and on the 9th day he pushed back his chair and said, "This is not an illness." Bram Cotter looked up. "It has all the marks of one." "It has all the marks of one," Ethan agreed, "and it has none of the behavior of one. It skips houses. It takes the strong and leaves the old. It follows the Ridge Road. Illness does not use roads, Bram. People use roads. You are saying somebody is doing this. I am saying I have 31 dead in 3 weeks, and every single one of them was a wolf who could fight." He put his hand flat on the map. "Find me somebody who can tell me what is in it." They found one. It took 4 more days, and the answer came up from the south along the Carter's Road, the way most true things travel, and it came in the mouth of a man who drove salt. "There is a woman at Halden Cross," he said, standing in the great hall with his hat in both hands, and his eyes very wide at the size of everything. 2 winters back, the whole of the crossing had the black chest, and she pulled 19 people out of it, and she did it by knowing what was in it. She told my brother-in-law what he had eaten before he told her. She is not a physician. I do not know what she is. But there is not a carter on the 3 roads who would not carry her on his own back if she asked. Her name? Marn, said the salt carter. Just Marn. At the side of the hall, Owen Grant put down the cup he was holding. Ethan wrote to her. He sent a rider with a formal request under seal, offering payment at a rate that would have bought the bakery she lived above 4 times over, and a guard escort, and a room at Ironcrest. The rider came back in 6 days with the letter in his bag, unopened, and 1 line written across the back of it, in a clean, steady hand. No. Ethan looked at that word for a long time. He sent again, with a larger sum and a request in his own writing. The second rider came back with the same paper and 1 more line under the first. Still no. She is not the only healer in the north, Bram Cotter said. She is the only one who knows what is in it, Ethan said. He stood up. Saddle 4 horses, he said. I am going myself. Owen Grant said, Ethan, in a voice that made 2 council members turn around, and Ethan looked at him and said, What? And Owen, who had ridden 900 miles in the last 4 months, following a line of circles on a map, who had stood in a village called Farron and heard a name, who had a fairly good idea of what was waiting at the top of a set of stairs above a bakery in Halden Cross, opened his mouth and found that he could not do it in a room with 11 other people in it. Nothing, he said. I will ride with you. They came into Halden Cross on a Thursday, at dusk, in the rain, with the market packing up around them. 4 riders, no banners, plain cloaks. Ethan had insisted on that. He had also insisted on doing the last part on foot, and so he walked up the lane past the bakery with his hood down and rain in his hair, and a shopkeeper pulling in her shutters looked at him and then looked again, because whatever he was not a carter. The stairs went up the outside of the building. There was a small wooden sign at the top of them with nothing on it but an open hand. He knocked. He heard footsteps inside, unhurried. He heard a bolt. The door opened. She was thinner. Her hair was longer and tied back, and there was gray in it that had no right to be there in a woman of 30, and she had a scar across 2 knuckles of her right hand from something he would never learn about. She was wearing an apron with the pockets full and her sleeves pushed up, and she had the particular tiredness of a person who has been standing since 6 in the morning. She looked at him. Ethan Hale had spent 4 years without saying her name out loud. He had rehearsed nothing, because he had honestly believed there would be time on the road to think, and there had not been, because his own wolf had spent the entire journey pressing so hard against the inside of his chest that he had barely been able to breathe. Nora, he said. Everything he had ever been afraid of was in the next 2 seconds. She did not cry. She did not shout. She did not go pale. She stood in her own doorway, with 1 hand on the frame, and she looked at him, the way she looked at anything that came up those stairs, steadily, taking the measure of it. You want the cure, she said. He had not expected that. He had expected anything except that. Yes. For the northern packs. Yes. Then you will want to know that it is not an illness, she said. It is in the water, and it is put there, and it is worked, so that it takes wolves and leaves humans, and whoever is doing it is walking down the ridge road ahead of it, dropping it in wells. The 4th day is not a recovery. It is the 2nd stage. Anyone you have sent home on the 5th day, send a rider after him tonight. Ethan stared at her. How do you know that? Because people talk to me, she said. That is what I do. Nora. My price, she said. Anything. Do not say anything, she said. You do not have anything. Here is my price. 400 silver. Half now, half when the last of the northern packs is clear. A written order, under your seal, that no wolf of Ironcrest sets foot in this town, on any business, for as long as I live in it. And your word said out loud on these stairs where your men can hear it, that when this is finished you will get on your horse, and you will not come back. The rain came down. That is the price, she said. It is not negotiable, and I will not lower it, and if you argue with any part of it, I will close this door. I did not come here to buy you, Ethan said. No, she said. You came here because 31 of your people are dead, and you have run out of other doors to knock on. I know exactly why you came. That is not an insult. It is arithmetic. You have never in your life come to me for anything else. That is not true. It was true once, she said. The once cost me everything I had. He put his hand on the door frame, not to push, just to hold on. Nora, he said, I know what I did. Do you? Every day, he said, every single day for 4 years. And here you are on my stairs asking for medicine, she said, which tells me exactly how much that has been worth to anyone but you. She reached past him and took the edge of the door. Send the silver up in the morning, she said. I will have the first list ready by noon. Boil everything. Move them off the wells to running water tonight. Tonight, not at first light. And tell your riders to keep away from my windows. Nora, wait. She closed the door in his face. He heard the bolt go across. Ethan Hale stood on a wet wooden landing above a bakery in a town he had never heard of 2 weeks ago, and something inside him that had been leaning on a shut door for 4 years came through it all at once. He got about 3 steps down. Then his legs went out from under him, and he sat down hard in the mud at the bottom of the stairs with both hands pressed flat against his chest, and the sound that came out of him was not a shout, and it was not a word. And Owen Grant crossed that yard faster than he had ever moved in his life, and got both arms around his king to stop him going face down in the water. Do not touch me. I am not touching you. I am holding you up. It is inside, Ethan said. His voice had gone strange. Owen, it is inside. It is trying to get out. It will not stop. I know. It knew before I did. 4 years. It knew the whole time. I know, said Owen Grant. Breathe. Above them, behind the shutter, Nora stood in the dark of her own front room, with her back against the wall, and her hand over her mouth, and did not go out. She could hear it. She could feel it too, the warmth under her ribs flaring up so hard that it made her eyes water. 4 years of a broken thing suddenly wide awake and screaming down a line that was supposed to be dead. She stayed where she was. A small voice said, Mama? Noah was standing in the doorway of the back room in his nightshirt with his hair stuck up on one side, holding the wooden horse he still slept with, and would deny sleeping with by daylight. Who is that man in the yard? Nora crossed the room and picked her son up, 4 years old and heavy now, and held him against her shoulder so that his face was turned away from the window. Nobody, she said. Go back to sleep. The silver came up the stairs at 7 the next morning, in 2 canvas bags, and the list came down at noon. It was 6 pages long, and it was the most useful thing anybody in the North had seen in 2 months. It gave the 3 stages and how to tell them apart. It gave the sign to watch for on the 4th day, which was a change in the whites of the eyes that everyone had been missing. It gave a wash for the wells that used nothing more exotic than charcoal, lime, and thyme. It gave the doses by body weight in a table, and at the bottom of the last page, in the same clean hand, it said, Do not give this to anyone under 7 years of age. Until I send the second list, I will send it Thursday. Ethan read it standing in the yard in the rain, and then read it again sitting on a stone with his hands shaking. Get 4 copies made, he said. Riders on all of them tonight. He stayed in Halden Cross for 19 days. He had not planned to. He had planned to take the list and go, because he had given his word on those stairs, out loud, with his men listening, exactly as she had demanded. But the list turned out to be the beginning, and not the end. Every day a rider came in from the north, with a question the list did not cover. And every day the question went up the outside stairs on a folded paper. And every day an answer came down. They never spoke. That was Nora's arrangement, and she held it like a wall. He wrote, she answered. If he came into the yard, she went away from the window. Once, on the 6th day, he saw her in the market with a basket, and she saw him, and she turned into the next row, and was gone, before he had finished deciding what his face was doing. He took a room at the inn on the corner, and did his kingdom's business from a table by the window, with a view of a bakery. The boy came and went from that stairway twice a day. Ethan noticed him on the 3rd morning, the way you notice any child in a small town, which is to say barely. Dark hair, fast, loud, carrying something too big for him every single time, a bucket, a bundle of kindling, a sack of flour half his own size, refusing all offers of help from 3 separate adults on the same trip. On the 8th morning, the boy came down the stairs at a run, missed the last 4 steps entirely, and hit the yard flat on the stones. Ethan was out of his chair before he knew he had moved. By the time he got to the door, the boy was already up, already brushing himself off, already annoyed. There was a long scrape from his elbow to his wrist with the dirt still in it. "Are you all right?" Ethan said. The boy looked up. They stood there for a moment in the wet morning, the king of Ironcrest and a 4-year-old with a scraped arm, and Ethan felt a small, strange pull in his chest that he put down entirely to the fact that he had not been right in the head for 4 years. "I am fine," the boy said. "It does not hurt." "That is a bad scrape. Let me see." "It is not bad. Watch." And he wiped his arm on his shirt, and Ethan looked at the skin underneath, and the scrape was already closing. Not healed, closing. In under a minute, in front of him, the way it happens with a strong young wolf, and with absolutely nothing else in the world. Ethan Hale's heart stopped. "Noah." Nora's voice came off the top of the stairs like a whip crack, and the boy was up and gone, taking the steps 2 at a time, and the door shut behind him hard enough to rattle the shutters. Ethan stood in the yard. He looked at the closed door for a very long time. Then he went back to the inn and sat down at his table by the window and did not read a single word of the 6 documents in front of him. There is a thing that happens when a man decides not to look directly at something. It does not go away. It sits at the edge of everything, and it gets heavier. He was still sitting there at dusk when Owen Grant came in, put a folded paper on the table, and sat down opposite him without asking. "What is this?" "Open it." Ethan opened it. It was a map, worn soft at the folds, covered in small circles in faded ink, each with a date beside it. There were more than 50, and laid along them, drawn in a heavier line, was a path. "I have been keeping it since the second moon," Owen said. "I did not tell you because for 3 years I thought it was nothing but a wolf running mad, and I did not want to put a thing like that in your hands. And now? Now I want you to look at the last 9 circles," Owen said, "and tell me what you see." Ethan looked. Farron, Callow Bridge, Stint, Merritt's Ford, Ash Green, Wicker Hill, Barden, Netley. And the 9th, the newest, marked 11 days ago in fresh ink, sitting on a crossroads town where 3 roads met. Halden Cross. "The 9th is from this month," Ethan said slowly. "This month is not over. The moon is not until tomorrow." "No," said Owen. "That one is from 4 months ago. In April. You were here in April, Ethan. You have been here before. You have been to that yard before. It has come to that stairway 3 times in the last 2 years, and the last time it lay across the bottom step until dawn, and I sat on a wall and watched it, and I did not tell you." Ethan put the map down. "Why not?" "Because you would have asked me who lived there," said Owen. "And 4 months ago I did not know, and I did not want to be the man who guessed." "And the others? All these others?" "Every one of them is a place she lived," Owen said. "I have ridden 6 of them myself, and asked. A healer, quiet, stayed a winter, moved on. Sometimes they had the name Marn, and sometimes they had no name at all. Ethan, it has not been running mad for 4 years. It has been walking her trail. It has been finding every place she stopped, one after another, in order, 4 years behind her, and closing the gap." The room was very quiet. "Say the rest of it," Ethan said. "You know the rest of it. Say it anyway. Out loud. I want to hear a man say it in a room." Owen Grant leaned forward with his forearms on the table. "The bond did not sever," he said. "You spoke the words and the words shut it on your side, and that is all they did. It is still there. It has been there the whole time. And whatever is left of it has been trying to get to her every month for 4 years, and you have been telling yourself it is an affliction." Ethan sat back. He thought about a warmth under his ribs in the hour before moonrise, coming and going, 4 years of it, and every single time telling himself it was nothing. "If it never severed on my side," he said slowly, "then it never severed on hers." Owen said nothing. "Owen, answer me." "You already know," Owen said. "She has felt this," Ethan said, "for 4 years. In a shed somewhere in the burned country, and then in a village, and then another village, alone, thrown out, told she was a traitor by 600 people. She has been feeling a bond she was told was dead, pulling at her once a month, and had no idea why." He put both hands over his face. She thought she was going mad, he said. The moon came up the next night. Ethan had made his arrangements. He had told Owen to take the horses out of the yard, and to put every man on the far side of town, and to leave him alone. And Owen had argued, and lost, and gone. He sat on the edge of the bed in the inn as the light changed, and he waited for the black, the familiar slide sideways out of himself that had taken 4 years of his life in single nights. It did not come. The change came, and it was not gentle, and there was a long moment of falling, but he did not go out. He was there. He was inside it, awake, riding along behind his own eyes like a passenger in a cart, and everything was too loud, and too bright, and too full of information, and it was the first time he had shared himself with his own wolf since the night in the great hall. And it went straight for her door, down the inn stairs, across the yard, up the outside steps of the bakery. He felt every plank under his feet. He tried to stop it. He had 4 years of anger stored up for this thing, and he put every ounce of it into a single command, and he might as well have shouted at a river. It reached the top of the steps and stood in front of the door. Then it lay down across the doorway with its nose almost touching the wood. And it began to cry. Ethan Hale heard it from the inside. That was the thing. That was the thing he had never had. 4 years of reports, and averted eyes, and the king's affliction. And now he was inside the sound as it came out of him. It was not a howl. There was nothing proud in it. It was a small, cracked, endless noise, a thing that had been asking the same question for 4 years, and had never once been answered, and it was made almost quietly, as if it did not want to disturb anyone. He heard himself doing it, and could not stop. He would have given the whole kingdom to be unconscious. And then, on the other side of the door, he heard her. Footsteps, slow, coming across a wooden floor and stopping. Nothing for a moment. Then the sound of a person sitting down on the other side of the door, and the small settling creak of a shoulder coming to rest against the wood, 6 inches from him, with 2 boards in between. She did not speak. She did not open it. She just sat there. The crying went on. She stayed. An hour. 2. The temperature dropped and the frost came down over the roofs of Halden Cross, and a woman sat on the floor of her own front room with her back against her own door and let the sound come through it. And at some point Ethan realized that she was not enduring it. She was keeping him company. Something in him broke open at that. Not the wolf. Him. Near the 3rd hour her voice came through the wood, low, not much more than a breath. "I know," she said. "I know. I hear you." The crying stopped. It did not fade. It stopped. All at once, the way a child stops when it is finally picked up, and the great weight of the thing lying across her doorway let go of every muscle, and put its head down on the boards and lay still. They stayed like that until dawn. The change came back at the first gray light. Ethan came out of it on the landing on his hands and knees, a man again, in the clothes the change had not taken from him, shaking so hard he could not lift his head. He heard the bolt draw back. The door opened. Nora looked down at him. Her eyes were swollen, and her face was gray with a whole night of no sleep, and she was holding a folded blanket against her chest, with both arms like a shield. Neither of them said anything for a long moment. "How long?" she said at last. He knew exactly what she was asking. "Every month," he said, "since the night I did it. 51 times. 51, she repeated. "Owen has a map." Nora leaned her head against the doorframe and closed her eyes, and Ethan watched 4 years of a private and terrible confusion come apart in a woman's face. "I thought I was ill," she said. "I woke up warm every full moon for 4 years. I wrote it in my notes. I gave it a number. I told myself it was grief, because that was the only answer that did not make me a fool." Her voice went thin. "I looked for the reason for 4 years, and the reason was you, lying on the ground outside somebody else's door in the dark. Nora, do not," she said. She dropped the blanket over his shoulders, which was the first time she had touched him in 4 years, and it lasted about half a second.
"Get up,"
she said. "It is cold, and you are the king of somewhere, and if you die of the wet on my landing, they will find a way to say I did it." The proof came out of the north on a Tuesday. It came in the form of 2 barrels, sealed, taken off a cart on the Ridge Road by a patrol who had been told exactly what to look for, and the man driving that cart made it 11 miles before he was brought back. Nora opened one of the barrels in the yard behind the inn, with a cloth over her face, and both hands steady. She put her fingers just above the surface, the way Ethan had seen her do 100 times over a patient in another life, and stood there with her eyes shut. "Well," she said, "there it is. What is it? 3 things. Bloodroot, which is common. Silverleaf, which is not. It only grows on chalk, and the nearest chalk to here is the escarpment, 80 miles south. And a mineral I have only seen twice, and both times it came out of a mine that belongs to a crown." She stepped back. "Whoever made this did not learn it on a road, Ethan. This is careful work. Someone with money, someone with reach, and someone with enough learning to know that Silverleaf does nothing to a human being and shuts a wolf down like a snuffed candle." The carter talked before midnight, which surprised nobody, because he was a hired man with 3 children and no loyalty to anybody. He had loaded at a yard south of the escarpment. He had been paid in silver. Ironcrest Mint, new. Ethan went absolutely still. "Who paid you?" "Never saw a face," the carter said. "Money came through a factor at Wend, but the order paper had a house mark on it. I saw that much. I look at every paper I am given. My father taught me." "What mark?" The carter drew it in the dirt with his finger. Owen Grant made a small sound. It was the mark of the House of Crane. They rode for Ironcrest at dawn with everything they had, and it took 4 days, and Ethan Hale did not speak more than 20 words in the whole of it. Nora went with them. She had said no twice. She had stood in her own doorway and said, "This is not mine. I gave you the cure. We are finished." And then she had gone back inside and stood in the middle of her front room for a quarter of an hour, and had come back out and said, "I have one condition, and if you break it, I will never speak to you again, as long as I live. My son stays here. He stays with the baker and his wife, who have had him before and love him, and no wolf of Ironcrest goes anywhere near him, and nobody asks me one single question about him. Say yes." "Yes," Ethan said. The great hall was full again. It was the same room. The same benches, the same tall windows, the same fire. Nora Marne walked into it 4 years after she had been carried out of it, in a plain traveling coat, with her hair tied back, and every head in that hall turned, and she did not stop walking until she stood in the exact spot where she had stood before. She looked at the floor there for a second. Then she looked up. Helen Crane was standing at the right shoulder of the empty chair, exactly where she had always stood, in gray. "My king," she said calmly, as Ethan came up the hall. "I see you have brought a guest. Sit down, Helen." "I prefer to stand." "Sit down." Something in his voice made 200 people shift on the benches. Helen Crane sat. It took 90 minutes. Ethan laid it out himself, piece by piece, and he did it the way he had learned to do everything since the day he lost the ability to trust himself, which was slowly, with the evidence in his hand and the source named out loud for every single item. The barrels, the silverleaf and the chalk, the mineral from a crown mine. The yard south of the escarpment, which had been leased for 9 years by a factor in the town of Wend, and the factor's ledger, which had been taken from his house on the 2nd day, and now sat on the table, and which showed payments in and out under a house mark that everyone in that hall had seen on documents all their lives. Then Owen Grant stood up and read out the roll of the 39, and then the roll of the 61 now dead in the north, and put the 2 lists side by side, and gave the hall the one fact that turned the whole room. Every one of the 39 had been chosen for the vault detail by the War Council in a session 4 years ago. And of the 11 names originally put forward for that session, 8 had ended up dead, and all 8 had been wolves, who had spoken publicly against Helen Crane's influence over the young king. The hall made a noise then. It was not a good noise. "You planned the vault," Ethan said, "not to steal anything, to empty a council. You gave a roadman 200 of my own silver to leave a healer's satchel in the wreckage. You had the ward pattern, because you wrote the ward pattern. And when it was done, you stood at my shoulder and you told me that there was no half of it." "Yes," said Helen Crane. The hall went silent. She said it in the same voice she had used for 19 years. She did not stand up. She folded her hands in her lap and looked at the king with something that was almost affection. You want me to deny it, she said. I will not insult you. You have done good work, and most of it is correct. Why? Because I built you, said Helen Crane. She looked around the hall then, unhurried, taking in the whole room. Your father was killed when you were 11, she said. This kingdom had 4 claimants, and no army, and a boy who cried in the corridor because he could not reach his own table. I stood behind that chair for 19 years, and I put a country back together around a child, and I did it while 8 men on that council waited for you to fail, so they could carve it up. I removed them. I would do it again this afternoon. And Nora? Ethan said. Ah, said Helen. Yes. She turned her head and looked at Nora Marn for the first time, and there was still nothing in her face. No hatred, nothing personal at all. And that was the most frightening thing in the room. You were not a wicked woman, Helen said to her. You were an inconvenience. He was building a mate bond with a healer of no family in the middle of the most dangerous decade this kingdom has had in 200 years. A bonded king cannot be advised. He can only be persuaded, and he can be persuaded by exactly one person, and it is not the person standing behind the chair. She turned back to Ethan. I did not take a wife from you. I took a lever out of somebody else's hand. There was a price. I paid it with her, because she was the cheapest thing on the table. She was my mate. She was 39 dead warriors worth of stability, said Helen Crane. And you kept the throne, and the North did not burn. You are welcome. Ethan Hale looked at the woman who had raised him. Then he did the thing that people in that hall would talk about for the rest of their lives, which was nothing dramatic at all. Helen Crane, he said, you are stripped of your name, your house, your seat, and your place. Every paper you have ever signed will be opened. You will be taken to the northern packs, to the ones that buried 61 people this summer, and you will stand in front of each of them in turn and answer for it. And their word on you will be the word that holds, and I will not lift a hand to change it, whatever it is. For the first time, something moved in Helen Crane's face. They will not be reasonable, she said. No, said Ethan. They will not. They took her out through the side door. She walked without help, straight-backed, in gray, and she did not look at anybody. And then it was quiet, and there was a woman standing alone in the middle of the floor, and 200 people who had watched her, carried out of that same room 4 years ago. Bram Cotter stood up. He was grayer now, and one of the 8 names had been his own brother's. Healer, he said, and his voice was not steady. Nora Marn, this council was wrong. I was wrong. I called for the border myself, and I have thought about it every day since, and I am asking, in front of everyone, for whatever you are willing to give me. He bowed his head. Along the benches, one at a time, other people stood up, then whole rows. Ruth, who had sat in the 3rd row 4 years ago with her eyes on the floor, was crying openly. Somebody called out that the healer's name should be restored, and somebody else called out something about honors, and the hall began to fill with the enormous, warm, unbearable noise of a great many people being sorry all at once. Stop, said Nora. She did not shout it, but it went through that hall and everyone in it sat down. She turned around slowly and looked at them. Thank you, she said. I mean that. It costs something to stand up in a room and say you were wrong, and I will not pretend it does not matter to me. She was quiet for a second. But I want one thing said properly before anybody gives me anything, she said, because if it is not said today, it will never be said. And in 20 years, the story of this will be that a wicked woman fooled a whole kingdom, and everybody was helpless. She turned to the chair. Helen Crane did not make you cut the bond, Nora said. The hall went absolutely still. She built the case. She planted the bag. She had the ward pattern, and the silver, and the 19 years. I understand exactly how much of this was hers. Nora's voice stayed level. But she was not standing in front of me. You were. I stood on this floor, and I looked at you, and I told you the truth. And you had 11 months of me. Every day, every night. And you knew what I was. And you did not believe me. There was no lie in the room that night, she said. There was only a choice about who to trust, and you chose her. She spread her hands. That is not a conspiracy. That is a man. And no punishment you hand out this afternoon touches it. So please, do not stand up in a week and tell this hall that justice has been done. Something has been corrected. That is not the same thing. Nobody moved. Ethan Hale stood up from his father's chair, came down the 3 steps, and stopped in front of her, exactly as he had 4 years ago. "You are right," he said. And then, in front of every wolf in Ironcrest, the Alpha King went down on one knee in the middle of his own hall. "I am not going to ask you for anything," he said, "not today, not while you are standing on that floor. But I want it written in the record, in this room, where the other thing was written, that Nora Bennett told the truth, and that her king did not believe her, and that the fault was his alone." Nora looked down at him for a long moment. "Write it," she said. "And then get up. I have never once in my life wanted anybody kneeling in front of me, and I am not going to start with you." The scream came from behind the grain store, and Nora was running before she had finished putting down the bowl in her hands. She got round the corner in 11 seconds, and stopped dead. There were 3 older boys against the wall, backed up so hard that one of them had climbed halfway onto a barrel. There was a torn shirt on the ground, and in the middle of the yard, low and shaking and making a sound that no 4-year-old should ever be able to make, there was a wolf pup the size of a large dog, with dark fur and eyes she knew better than her own. "Out," Nora said to the boys. "Now, go home, say nothing. If I hear one word of this in this town, I will know exactly which of you said it." They went fast. She turned around and crouched down and put her hands out flat, and the thing that had been her son backed away from her into the corner of the wall, panting, terrified, and did not know her. That was what broke her heart. He did not know her. "Noah," she said. "Noah, it is me." He pressed himself into the corner. She sat down on the wet cobbles with her back to nothing, and made herself breathe slowly, and she began to talk about ordinary things in an ordinary voice. The price of flour, the widow Pratt's bad knee, the way he had eaten all the honey again and lied about it. She talked for 10 minutes without stopping. At some point one of the boys came back with a man, and the man came round the corner, and Nora said, without turning her head, "Get out of this yard," and something in her voice sent him away. And then, on the far side of the yard, the pup bolted. It went between 2 buildings, over a low wall, through the gap where the lane came out onto the north road, and it was gone into the fields with the light already dying. Nora Marne, who had held herself together through a severed bond and 4 winters and a burning stove full of paper, stood in that empty yard and screamed her son's name into the dark. It was the worst night of her life. Half the town turned out. They took lanterns up the north road and along the hedges and out to the water meadows, and they called for a boy, because Nora had told them a boy, and the whole time she knew that a boy was not what they would find. She knew what she had on her hands and could not say it to a single one of them. A first change at 4 years old is not natural. It is not supposed to happen for another 8 years at least. When it comes that early, it comes because something has driven it out of a child, and once it is out, a pup that young does not know how to come back. It has no words. It has no memory of being anything else. It runs on fear. It runs until it drops, and if the drop happens somewhere cold and wet, then in the morning there is nothing to carry home. At midnight she was on the north road with a lantern that had gone out. She heard horses. She turned round, and there were 4 riders coming up the road at speed, and the first one was off his horse before it had properly stopped. Ethan had gone back to Ironcrest 6 days before. He had gone because she had told him to, and he had left the written order under seal exactly as promised, and he had not argued about any of it. "Owen sent a rider," he said. "Nora, what has happened?" She looked at him. There is a moment when a thing that has been carried alone for 4 years becomes too heavy to carry for 1 more hour, and she reached it at midnight on a wet road with a dead lantern in her hand. "My son has changed," she said. Ethan went very still. "He is 4, Nora said. Her voice had gone flat and fast, the way it did over a bad wound. "He changed behind the grain store, because 3 older boys said something about me, and he did not know me afterward, and he ran north, through the gap by the mill, about 6 hours ago. He has no words. He does not know how to come back, and I cannot track him. Ethan, I have never been able to track anything in my life. I am a healer. I am the worst wolf in this entire country, and my son is out there, and I cannot follow him." "Nora," Ethan said. "Whose son is he? Are you going to help me or not? I am going to find him either way. Ethan said. I am asking so that I know what I am doing when I find him. A strange wolf does not walk up to a frightened pup. His blood will decide whether he comes or runs, and if he runs a second time, we do not get a third. Nora Marne stood on the north road out of Halden Cross, and gave up a secret she had promised herself she would take into the ground. He is yours, she said. Ethan did not move for a second. How old? 4 years and 8 months. She watched him do the arithmetic. She watched him arrive. He was already there, Ethan said, that night, in the hall. 6 weeks along, said Nora. I found out, in a shed, in Ashfall, 2 months after you put me in that cart, and I made up my mind that night that you would never know, and I have not changed my mind once in 4 years, and I have not changed it now. I am telling you, because he is out in a field, and you can find him, and I cannot. That is all this is. Do you understand me? Yes. Then go. His name? Noah, she said. Ethan Hale turned and walked off the road into the black field, pulling his coat off as he went, and by the time he reached the hedge he was not a man anymore. He found him at 3:30 in the morning. 3 miles out, in a fold of ground where a stream ran through a stand of thorn, there was a hollow under the roots of a fallen tree, and inside it, there was a small dark shape shaking so hard that the leaves around it were moving. Ethan stopped 40 feet away. He did not go closer. He lay down in the wet grass with his chin on his paws, which for a wolf of his size in front of a pup meant one thing only, and he waited. The shaking slowed. An ear came up. 20 minutes went by, then a nose came out of the hollow, and then a head, and the pup stood there in the dark on legs that would not hold him properly, and stared at the enormous thing lying in the grass. Ethan did not move, and the pup came out. He came the whole way, unsteady, sniffing, still frightened, and he got within 6 feet, and stopped, and lifted his head, and he took in the scent of the wolf in front of him. Then he made a small sound, and walked straight into him, and collapsed against his chest. There is a thing that happens in a bloodline. It has no ceremony and no words. A young wolf who has never in his life seen his father will still know him at the first breath, because the answer is written in him and always was. It is the oldest recognition there is, and it does not care about kingdoms or councils, or 4 years, or anything else. Noah Marne pushed his face into his father's fur and stopped shaking. Ethan Hale lay in the wet grass in a black field with his son under his chin, and did not move for 2 hours, and if he had been a man, he would not have been able to see anything at all. At first light, the pup slid back without knowing he was doing it, and there was a small, naked, exhausted boy asleep in the roots of a fallen tree. And Ethan came back into himself and got his coat around him and picked him up. Noah woke up halfway across the second field. He looked at the man carrying him. He looked at him for a long time in the gray light, with his head against his shoulder. You were the wolf, he said. Yes. Are you the one who cries outside our door? Ethan kept walking. It took him a moment. Yes, he said. I am. Mama says it is the wind. Your mother, said Ethan, is a very good liar about small things, and a completely terrible one about big things. Noah thought about this. I could not get back, he said, and his voice went wobbly for the first time. I tried. I kept trying, and I could not remember how, and I could not find the road, and I could not. I know. I want my mother. I am taking you to her, Ethan said. Right now. Look up. Can you see the smoke? That is the bakery. We will be there before she has the water hot. Nora was standing at the top of the outside stairs when they came into the yard. She came down them so fast she nearly fell, and she took her son out of Ethan's arms and sat down on the third step from the bottom with him in her lap and put her face into his hair, and she did not say a word for a full minute. Ethan stood in the yard and let her have it. When she looked up at last, her eyes were red and her voice had gone rough. Was he hurt? Cold. Frightened. Not hurt. He held on to the change for 8 hours at 4 years old, and then let it go by himself, which I have never heard of. He paused. He is strong, Nora. He is going to be very strong, and that is not a small problem, and it is not going away. I know exactly what it is. I know you do. She held Noah tighter. You are going to want him now, she said. Nora. Say it plainly. I would rather have it plainly. She lifted her chin. He is your blood, and he is a boy, and there is no heir at Ironcrest. And everything in that kingdom has been holding its breath for 4 years, waiting for somebody to solve that. I am one woman above a bakery. If you want to take him, I cannot stop you, and we both know it. The yard was very quiet. Are you finished? Ethan said. Do not. I am going to say this once, he said, and then I am going to leave, because you have been awake all night, and you are holding a 4-year-old, and this is a terrible morning to have this conversation. He put his hands behind his back, the way he did in council when he wanted them still. I am not going to claim him, he said. Not by law, not by blood right, not by any road. There is no paper anywhere in Ironcrest with his name on it, and there will not be one unless you write it yourself. If you want him to grow up in this town as Noah Marn and never hear the word crown again, that is what will happen, and I will sign whatever makes you believe it. Nora stared at him. You have no heir, she said. I have a cousin in the south who is dull and honest and will make a perfectly acceptable king, Ethan said. The kingdom will survive being disappointed. It has survived worse things, and most of them were mine. Then what are you asking for? Permission, he said. Nora did not answer. That is the whole of it, Ethan said. Permission to come here. Permission to be somewhere he can see me, as often as you allow, and not one visit more, for as long as you allow it. Not as a king, as a man who has to earn a place in a room he threw himself out of. On your terms, on your timing, and if the answer is no, then the answer is no, and I will go home, and you will never see me on those stairs again. You cannot promise that, she said. You go where the wolf takes you. 51 times, Ethan. You have no more control over that than I have over the weather. That is the other thing, he said. I am not going to let it ask for me anymore. She frowned. What does that mean? It means that whatever that thing does on a full moon, it has been speaking on my behalf for 4 years, and I never chose one word of it, he said. It cried at your door. I did not. It found this town. I did not. Everything you have had from me since the night I ruined your life has come out of an animal that will not be commanded, and you deserve better than being asked for by something that cannot help itself. He shook his head slowly. So no. From now on, if anything wants your forgiveness, it will be me, awake, in daylight, in words, standing where you can see my face, and say no to it. Nora looked at him for a very long time. I am not going to answer you today, she said at last. I did not expect you to. I do not mean today, she said. I mean, I am not going to answer you for a long time, months, perhaps longer. I do not know what the answer is, and I am not going to make one up to end an uncomfortable morning, and I will not be hurried by you, or by that hall, or by anybody being sorry. All right. You will have to live with it unanswered. Nora, said Ethan Hale, I have been living with something unanswered for 4 years, and I earned every hour of it. I can do a winter. The roof leaked in 3 places by October, and the man fixing it was extremely bad at it. That was the first thing the town of Halden Cross learned about the visitor. He came every 8 or 9 days, on a plain horse, in plain clothes, with no escort past the crossroads. He paid for his room at the inn like anybody else. He was polite, to the point of being slightly alarming, and he could not lay a shingle to save his life. You are doing it upside down, Noah said from the top of the ladder. I am not. You are. The bendy bit goes under. Who told you that? Mr. Pike. He does roofs. He is very good, and he says you are not. Mr. Pike, said Ethan, can come and do it himself then. He offered. Mama said no. She said you had to do it. Ethan sat back on the wet slope of the roof and started to laugh, and once he had started he found it difficult to stop. And down in the yard, a woman hanging washing looked up at the sound, and then went back to her basket without saying anything at all. That was the shape of that autumn. He came. He stayed 2 days, sometimes 3. He slept at the inn every single night, and never once asked otherwise. He learned how his son took his bread, which was with too much honey, and what frightened him, which was deep water, and what he was better at than any child in the town, which was remembering things, everything, in order, forever. He took him out into the hills on the 4th visit and taught him the beginning of the thing he had done in the field, slowly, in daylight, for 1 hour at a time, and brought him back when the boy was tired, instead of when the lesson was finished. That was Nora's rule. She had 11 rules. He kept all 11. He never asked her the question again. That was the part she had not expected, and it undid her far more than asking would have. She had been braced for it every visit. The careful reopening, the well, have you thought? It never came. He arrived, he did what he had come to do, he said thank you at the door, and he rode away. And the question sat there between them all, autumn like a stone in a stream, with the water going round it. In November she asked him to stay for supper. It was the first time. It was an ordinary supper, and Noah talked for most of it, and at the end Ethan stood up and cleared the plates without being asked, and then said good night and went to the inn. In December she asked again, and this time she asked him what had happened to Helen Crane, and he told her, plainly, the whole of it, without softening any part. "Do you feel better?" she asked. "No," he said. "Good," she said, and after a moment she poured him more tea, and neither of them made anything of it. The full moons came and went. He was there for 2 of them, in October and November, and both times he did the same thing. He came to the bottom of the outside stairs an hour before moonrise, and he sat down on the lowest step, and he stayed there, human, all night. She watched him from the window the first time, expecting the change to take him anyway. It did not. He sat with his back against the post, and his arms on his knees, and his head down, and he held it, hour after hour, and she could see what it cost him, in every line of him, the shaking, the way his hands closed, the way he had to put his forehead against his own arm around the second hour, and stay like that for a long time, but he held it, and a little before dawn, when it finally let him go, he stood up stiffly, and went back to the inn, and slept for a day and a half. He never mentioned it afterward, not once, in either month. She mentioned it in December, standing in her doorway with a cloth in her hands. "You are going to do yourself harm." "Probably." "Why?" "I told you why," Ethan said. "In October, you would have been listening to a thing crying on your landing, and you would have felt sorry for it, and one day, you would have opened the door because of that, and neither of us would ever have known what you actually wanted." He shrugged. "I would rather sit on a step." Nora stood there for a moment. Then she said, "There is soup," and went back inside, and left the door open behind her, which she had not done before. The last full moon of the year came in the middle of January, in hard frost, with the whole of Halden Cross iced silver, and the smoke going straight up from every chimney. Ethan came into the yard an hour before moonrise, as he always did, and put his hand on the post at the bottom of the stairs, and then he stopped, because the door at the top was open, and there was light coming out of it, and Nora Marne was standing on the landing in her coat with her arms folded. "Come up," she said. "Nora, it is nearly moonrise. I do not want to be inside your—" "Come up," she said again, "before I lose my nerve, because I have been standing here for 20 minutes, and it is extremely cold." He came up. She did not step back to let him in. She stayed where she was on the landing, and he stopped 2 steps below her, so that for once she was looking down at him. "I have an answer," she said. Ethan said nothing at all. "It took 9 months," Nora said, "and I want you to understand that most of it was not about you. I had to work out what I had become first, because the woman who stood in that hall 4 years ago does not exist anymore. She died on a cart on the East Road. What is here is somebody else, and I like her better, and I was not going to hand her over to anybody until I knew what she wanted." She took a breath. It shook slightly. "I have not forgiven you," she said. "I want that said first, because it will not be said again, and I do not want you finding out later that I was being kind. What you did in that hall is the worst thing anybody has ever done to me, and I am never going to reach a day when it does not sit somewhere in me. I do not think that goes. I think I am going to be a woman who flinches when a room goes quiet for the rest of my life." "I know," Ethan said. "But," she said. She stopped. "Say it however you need to," he said. "You have sat on that step in the frost," she said. "Twice, 3 times now. You have never once asked me for anything since that morning in the yard, and you have had every chance and every reason, and you have not. You told a hall of 200 people that the fault was yours alone, when you could have let them blame a dead woman's schemes and walked out clean. You have not claimed my son, You did not even ask me to write his name down. Her voice went unsteady. And he loves you, Ethan. That happened. I watched it happen, and I did not stop it. And I have had to be honest with myself about the fact that I did not stop it. The frost cracked somewhere on the roof. So here is my answer, Nora said. I am not forgiving you. I am willing to find out whether there is anything left. Ethan Hale closed his eyes. That is all, she said. That is the whole offer. It is not a bond, and it is not a promise, and it is not a homecoming. It is a woman saying you may stay for supper on a Wednesday, and we will see what happens. It could still come to nothing. If it does, you will go, and you will go the first time I ask, and you will not make me ask twice. Yes, he said. Say the rest of it. I will go the first time you ask, Ethan said, and I will not make you ask twice, and I will not ask you for one single thing between now and whenever you decide, and if it comes to nothing, then it comes to nothing, and I will still be at that boy's door twice a month, until he is grown, and after that, as long as he wants me. Nora nodded once, quickly, the way she did when she had finished a difficult stitch. Right, she said. Then come inside. You are letting all the heat out. The moon came up 11 minutes later. Ethan felt it arrive. He was standing by the stove with a cup in his hand, and it came, and everything in him tightened, and Nora saw it and put her cup down. And then it did not happen. The change did not come. The thing that had thrown him across 4 counties on 52 separate nights lifted its head and looked around and found itself standing in a warm room with a fire going and a boy asleep in the next room and her, 6 feet away, close enough to hear breathing. And it lay down. Ethan put the cup on the table very carefully because his hand had begun to shake and sat down in the chair nearest to him. It is not going to happen, he said. What? It is not going to happen tonight. He laughed, and it came out cracked. 4 years, 52 times, and it just stopped. Nora crossed the room. She stood in front of him for a second. Then she put her hand flat on his chest, over the place where it had all been, and left it there. The bond did not come back that night. It came back the way a bone knits, which is slowly, badly at first, aching in the cold. There was a warmth, small, uneven, weeks of it flickering and dropping like a lamp with a bad wick. Sometimes it was strong enough that she could feel him a mile out on the road, and sometimes it was gone for 4 days at a time, and she would go on chopping onions with her jaw set and say nothing about it. It never became what it had been. There was a scar in it, a dull place, a snag, a spot where the line did not run clean. She felt it every day. So did he. They talked about it once, that spring, sitting on the top step with the door open behind them. I could ask the elders, Ethan said. There may be a way to smooth it. There are old rights, there might be. No, said Nora. It hurts you. It reminds me, she said. There is a difference, and I want the difference. She looked out at the yard. If it healed clean, then in 20 years it would be a story we told badly. It would turn into something soft. Somebody's grandchild would say, and then they were happy, and that would be the end of it, and the whole of what it cost me would go out of the world. She shook her head. No, it stays. I want to feel it when it is cold. I want you to feel it too. Ethan thought about it for a long moment. All right, he said. It stays. And it did. They did not marry again. They never spoke the old words, either of them. Not once, for the rest of their lives. And neither of them ever explained that to anybody who asked. Noah Marn kept his mother's name. He grew up in a crossroads town above a bakery and learned his letters from the widow Pratt and his medicine from his mother, and, in 1 hour at a time on the hills above Halden Cross, everything else from his father. At 19, he was offered a crown by a council that had spent 15 years working out how to word it. He thought about it for a week and took it, on one condition, which was that the first act of his reign would be to read into the record the name of every wolf who had died at the vault and in the north, and the name of the woman who had been sent east for it, in that order, out loud, himself. Ironcrest opened the east wing in the second spring. It had been shut for 5 years. They took the boards off the windows and carried out the ruined furniture, and let the light into rooms that smelled of dust and old smoke, and they scrubbed it from the roof down, and when it was finished, it was the brightest part of that whole gray building, 3 windows facing east, and the morning coming straight in across the floorboards. Nora would not live there. She said so from the beginning, and never bent on it. She kept the rooms above the bakery in Halden Cross until she died, and she was there more than half of every year, because there were people on those 3 roads who had no one else, and because she had built something with her own hands, out of nothing, in the worst years of her life, and she was not going to hand it back. But she came in the winters. And on the coldest nights of those winters, in the east wing of Ironcrest, in a room full of morning light that nobody had been allowed to enter for 5 years, there was a bed, with a woman asleep in it, and a great dark wolf stretched out across the foot of it, breathing slow, with his head on his paws. Not in a doorway, not outside, not crying.